All right. Well, I know this is Saturday. I usually don't do devotions on Saturday, but we had some really high winds come through here. Now, it's not Florida. I don't want to equivocate, but it was very powerful. I mean, the wind can be powerful up here in the mountains anyway. And then with the hurricane pushing, anyway, we lost power after 6 minutes of my devotions on episode 87 out of Deuteronomy chapter 20. And then I was thinking to myself, should I just let it go or should I finish it up? And I thought, why don't we just finish it up? So if you've already seen the first 6 minutes and you're happy with it, then you can just forgo this. But at least I wanted a record of the chapter here for our devotion. So I'm doing this on this Saturday, which I don't normally do. But basically, this is just a recovery devotion because of the storm yesterday. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 20, and it posted the whole chapter, verses 1 through 20, for the rules of war. First four verses, as I said last time, have to deal with the fact that when they go up against an army that is more powerful than them, not to be afraid. And Moses writes here under inspiration about horses and chariots in verse 1, which would have been like your tanks of the ancient Near East. And so when you come up against horses and chariots, I mean, these things are very powerful. But God reminds them that the greatest horsemen in the chariot army, horses and chariots, were in Egypt, and he defeated the Egyptians. So not to be fearful. That's how verse 1 begins. And then he says, when you begin the battle, he wants the priests to go out and speak to the people and say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. We're going to war. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be terrified because of them. Don't be afraid. Be courageous out there, guys. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. And there's a record of him doing this. So when you go out, be mindful not to be afraid, even though the enemy across the field appears to be and is more powerful than you, because God's on your side. And here it's specifically spoken, but you just in a indirect way, if you're doing the will of God against evil, I mean, it's not a guarantee as it is here, because this was specifically applied to the nation of Israel. But God is on the side of what is right, and He has been on the side of what is right historically, and those that fight against wrong are not in any way pure. It's not like He uses godly people, so to speak, or spiritually godly people to win the victory. What He uses is civil governments that are doing the right thing against other civil governments that are engaged in wickedness. And on that level, on the level of the civil government, he has allowed in the history of the world, especially in the history of the United States, for those who are fighting for freedom and liberty and the ability for Christians to live openly and freely in society, has allowed them the victory. So in that overlap we have it. And then we have this issue of these, there's verses 5 through 9. There's these interesting things it says about for if you go to war, because before they head out to battle, he's going to give these caveats, so to speak. It's very interesting. He says, first of all, in verse 5, if you build a new house and you haven't dedicated it, you can go home, because you might die before you have a chance to live in it. So how many of you have built a new house but you haven't had a chance to live in it yet? And some of the guys will say, yeah, I just finished it. And he says, well, you can go home, because if you get killed in battle, you're never going to enjoy the blessing of your own place. And then it says, have you planted a vineyard? So a place to live in a vineyard, it would be your income. How many have planted a new vineyard? But you've never had a chance to benefit from your labors. He says, you can go home too. Lest another man eat it, it says. That is, you're going to do all this work and you're going to leave it to somebody else? No, if you're in the army and you've planted a new vineyard and you need to go home and enjoy it, then you can head home too. And then it talks about here about if you betrothed a wife. So are you engaged to this woman? With betrothal here was much closer to marriage than it is in our idea of just being engaged. But if you're betrothed to a woman and you've never been with her, he says, let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle and another man take her. That is, to go home to your wife, all right? So your new wife. It's very interesting. Lest you die in battle and you never experience the time with your wife. So it's interesting here. New house, new vineyard, new wife. Okay, you just go home. Don't worry about it. It's part of the rules of battle. I think it's very interesting. This is part of the mechanism God uses when they're going to war. Now it doesn't say how long, and like you're out of it forever, but at least you go home until you've enjoyed these things. All right, your home, your vineyard, or your wife. And then it says, what if there's fearful people there? Because the point is, even though everybody knows that God is on their side, and I try to get this across, that some men especially, are just timid. They are saved and timid. They are fearful and saved. They're saved men, but they're fearful. They are just very unstable men, but they're saved. They're going to be in heaven. I've been in the company of these guys, and you might say to yourself, well, if you know God is on your side, why don't you just, draw on some courage and get in the fight? Because some men don't have it in them. They just don't. This is hard to communicate because God uses us the way we are. Some are more forceful, some are introverts, some are extroverts, some are more boisterous, some are more withdrawn and quiet. Everybody has a personality, and it is that person that God saves to utilize the diversity of our personalities in his kingdom. But he saves men of different propensities and characteristics and mannerisms. This is who God uses. So whoever you are, is going to be the saved person. But the fact that you're who you are is because that's who you are. Some men, because of who they are bold, or more bold and more courageous. This is just the way God's made them. And here, some men are not bold. They don't have any boldness in them. They're fearful in why God made them that way, or why God permits this to happen. I'm not sure. But you run into these guys in the Israeli army. I would say these men should not be in the army. That is, this is not the kind of guy that you want going to the Marine Corps recruiter and saying, I want to join the Marines. This is not the guy. Because there's some men like this. And I'm not saying that if you go into the armed forces that they can't instill some of this in you, but I'll just tell you, because of who we are, if this can't be learned, then you're just going to be a setback to the other men in your unit, because you just don't have it in you. So it says this, and it says, and the officers shall speak further unto the people, and say unto them, what man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Are there any of you there like this? And you're looking around, and some guys they're not going home for anything, because they're in the battle and they're looking around, and the guy on the left and the guy on the right, they're going, so they're not. Some guys can't do this. He says that they're faint-hearted. Let him go and return unto his house, and this is why, lest his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart. That is, faint-heartedness is contagious. That is, if you say the enemy's too great and I just don't have it in them, before you know it, others will think this. That's why you need somebody that leads that is not faint-hearted. You need leaders that are ready to go into the fray, go into the battle, attack the enemy, go into the attack, all right, and stay there till the victory is won. That is a virtue, all right, of our armed forces, and why we win, because we don't back up. I mean, this is the caliber of those that serve in our armed forces here in the States, and the same thing here with the Israeli army. They don't want anybody there that's going to make everybody fearful, because this can be contagious. I mean, if it's really that bad, why is he afraid? And before you know it, others are feeling that way. So before this ever infects the army, you send them home. All right? I just I just think it's important to know when I say, and people take me at task, that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and then everybody quotes the Bible to me about if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away, behold, all things are become new. And you think I'm going to deny that? No. But you know who that new creature is? That new creature is an old dog that you can't teach new tricks to. He is either a bold man that is a new creature, or he is a timid man who is a new creature. He is a bold man. He is a courageous man. He is a virtuous man. All these things, or he's not. He's the one that is made into a new creature. He's new. But who you are essentially as a person, I say, I've said, once you're 18 or 22, once you get out of college, there's not going to be much change in your life until you die. I mean, if you were a hard worker when you were in your late teens and early 20s, and you'll be a hard worker. If you were slothful, you'll be going to be slothful. I mean, this is just the way we are as men. All right. So these are afraid. And then it says in verse 9 that now you got to make captains. I mean, you got to have guys that are going to lead groups of men, the number of men. And then that brings us to those rules of war. And then it says this in verse 10, verses 10 through 18. There's two kinds of cities. It's interesting here. There's two kinds of cities. There's cities that are far off. That's the first group here. And there are cities that are occupied by those that are named in verse 17. You have the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. So you have those people in those cities, and then you have these cities that are afar off, and you handle these places in two different ways. First, it tells us that if you come into one of these cities that is afar off, your army marches up to the walls, and you say, surrender. And they say, okay, we're going to surrender. If they surrender to you, then, and this is not the names that I just read there, the Canaanite nations. These are other nations. It's interesting because there's an expectation that the army of Israel is going to extend beyond these nations that they're just supposed to totally wipe out. Anyway, if they say, yeah, we'll surrender to you, then all you do is tax them. You tax them. It said, go to the city to fight against it in verse 10. If you say peace and open unto thee, that is, they open their gates, you don't have to fight them, that all the people that is found therein shall be tributaries unto thee, and they shall serve thee. So basically, you're going to tax them, you're just going to use them as servants, all right? But their lives are going to be sustained. But let's say you walk up to one of these other cities, and they say, no, we're not going to have any peace with you. We're not going to yield to the Israeli army. It says, the next thing he says, if they will not make peace, then you're going to make war against them, and you're going to besiege the city, and that just means you cut off food and water from the city until you starve them out. That's essentially what it comes down to. That's why it was almost impossible to besiege Babylon, because the Euphrates River ran right through town. And the only way that they got into Babylon is the Persian engineers. This is when guys with shovels won the day. The Persian engineers diverted the Euphrates River, and they went under the wall because you couldn't get into Babylon. It was just too powerful a city, too huge a city. So they diverted the Euphrates River, and they walked in on the riverbed, and that's how they got through the wall. That's how the Persians beat the Babylonians. Anyway, it says, and if they won't make peace, then you besiege it, and the siege is going to win. And when the Lord thy God hath delivered it into thine hand, you kill all the men, you smite all the men with the edge of the sword, because they're your enemy, all right? And you keep the women, the children, and the little ones, and the cattle alive, and all of that is a spoil, the spoils of war, all right? So that's for these. He said, this is verse 15. It's interesting to know. Thus shalt thou do unto all the cities that are very far off from thee, verse 15, which are not of the cities of these nations. So this is what you do if it's not the nations that I just read in verse 17. This is how things are managed. So the best thing to do is just yield, and at least you save your life. If you want to fight, you're going to be sieged. After the siege wins, then all the men are killed, and everything else belongs to the Israelis. The next thing you have here It's verse 16. But of the cities of these people which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, thou shalt save alive none that breatheth. That is, nobody survives this. And that's the list: Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. And the reason for that is in verse 18, which we've looked at before, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations, which they have done unto their gods. So should you sin against the Lord your God. And remember, I'm not going to go through this again, how evil and wicked these nations are. They sacrifice their own kids. It's every kind of abomination, immoral debauchery. Um, that's where they're going here. And they hate Israel as much as when Israel goes in. Don't look at these people like these are saints. These are criminals. These are criminal nations. These are wicked nations. These are killers. And when you go in, he says you just got to wipe them all out. That's what you have to do. Everything that has breath in it, that you wipe out. You're going to war. I, I think there's something you have to note here, that this is the hard truth of war. It really is, and we don't want to talk about it now because of our sensibilities. But you cannot win a war just by killing off soldiers. You cannot. The only way we won the Second World War is we had to drop bombs on civilian targets. That's how the war ended. Two atomic bombs in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Once that happened, the war came to an end. Same thing when it came to Germany. We bombed civilian targets because we just decimated Europe with our bombing. And it wasn't until we started bombing civilian targets that everybody finally yields, because up until that time it's just going to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And you say to yourself, because now what we have is targeted weapons, and we're so much more discreet and all of those things. But the reason we won in the past is because of some of the principles that are laid out here, and that it's not simply the army that you have to destroy. It is the infrastructure and the nation that you have to destroy to win the war. And I know I'm talking in 2024 to those who don't read the Bible. I mean, when people don't read the Bible much and they don't see this, and they think that the Bible is cruel, and they probably think what we had to do in the war is cruel. When you consider how many lives were saved because we brought the Second World War to an end. And let me just say, war is a horrible, immoral thing. Horribly immoral. I mean, it is terrible, except this is how God, the only way, so when it comes to tyrants, to destroy them. They bombed Pearl Harbor. Nazi Germany went into Poland, while Poland is minding its own business, because wickedness needs to be stopped. It needs to be stopped. And when a nation goes to war, it's not just the military that goes to war, it's the nation that goes to war. Everybody's in. So that's what we're seeing here. These wicked kings and these wicked armies, it's necessary that they're wiped out. And that's not just military men. This is the civilian population as well. That's what we're reading here. And as hard as that is to hear, that is how it's done. It's always been done that way. And that's how you bring wickedness to an end. And that's why we defeated at great cost, blood and treasure, our young men in the First and Second World Wars. These are terrible things we're talking about, but this is how it gets done. This is how it gets done. So he says, and here, these nations are wicked. And so if you don't wipe them out, you're going to end up worshiping the same gods, and in the end, you're going to end up sacrificing your own kids to the same gods they sacrifice their kids to. And then it says this, verse 19 and 20 is an interesting place to close, because it talks about sieging a city. The last two verses. There's instructions on how to siege a city, because if you're going to siege a city, usually you would get these machines or towers that you would climb up so you could shoot arrows from a heightened position, right? These towers that you would build, put them on wheels. Or if you were to build catapults, or if you're going to make ladders, or if you're going to make spears, or any kind of weaponry. The Bible says, don't build the stuff that you're going to siege a city out of trees that you can eat from. This siege may take a while. You're going to need those fruit trees so you have food. Don't take an apple tree and make a siege machine out of it, because food is better than a siege machine. Don't take that pear tree over there and chop it and make it into something for a siege. It's very, he says, this is not, that's a rule of war. So if it's something that you can eat, don't chop it down to make something to siege the city. He says, when thou shalt besiege a city a long time and making war against it, to take it, thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them, for thou mayest eat of them. For they shall not cut them down, for the tree of the field is man's life to employ them in the siege. That's what's going to keep you alive, and you just chop down your food. Don't do that. Only the trees which thou knowest that they be not trees for meat, for food, thou shalt destroy and cut them down. And thou shalt build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with thee until it be subdued. Rules for war. Those in Canaan you wipe out. Those in cities afar off, there's these different layers. If you just had a house, you can go home. If you just planted a vineyard, you can go home. If you got a new wife, you can go home. If you're afraid, you can go home. Got to get your captains. And then these rules for wherever the city is. Oh, man. I told a bunch of men at a men's meeting that the reason that the iron, some of the iron is being bred out of the American man is because we don't read the Bible. If preachers preached this stuff and made proper application, they would see the reality of life and death and the reality of evil in what war is all about, and we would not have an incorrect notion of the evil and the necessity to destroy evil and what it means. There are principles laid out in God's Word that in the past have governed the way the United States as a nation has thought about war. And these are hard things to think about, terribly hard things to think about. But this is the cost. This is the cost to the evil invading nation once they start. Once Nazi Germany started, the way they were going to be crushed and put out of existence was by the treasure of the United States and England and allies, but the United States. The war machine, the blood of countless men, I didn't look up how many, that had to die so we could be free to destroy them. And let me just say this too. After so many had been lost in America, going after something that imposed on Europe and bombs that killed so many of our guys on Sunday at Pearl Harbor. There isn't anybody here that said we need to bring this to an end because we don't want to send one more of our boys overseas. We got to bring this to an end. Yes, we do. We're not sending one more. We're not going to try to invade the homeland of Japan because of their radical religion. No, it has to be something overwhelming. And now we stand back and we judge. No, you just need to be there and experience the homes and suffering of those who lost loved ones only because they were trying to save the innocent from evil. So it's just something to think about. All right. Well, that is, I called that 87A. All right. So I don't usually do something on Saturday, but here it is. So we'll pick up again on Monday with 88. But the Lord bless you. And I don't know. I got a lot of hits on 6 minutes. Maybe I should just leave it at 6 minutes. So, okay. Lord bless you. Have a great Lord's Day tomorrow. We'll see you. Bye.